The baby's wail pierced through the cabin like a desperate plea, raw and trembling, as if the tiny heart inside that fragile body was shattering with every second. Passengers shifted irritably in their seats, flight attendants exchanged helpless glances, and somewhere in the midst of exhausted sighs and annoyed murmurs sat a man whose life had been defined by control, but now, for the first time, he looked utterly powerless. His baby, the last piece of a love he once had and lost, wouldn't stop crying. The billionaire who could buy solutions for every problem in the world suddenly faced the one thing his money couldn't fix. Sparkles, if you believe kindness still matters, if you believe in second chances and unexpected miracles, please like, comment, share, and subscribe right now. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. Sparkles. He leaned back in his seat, eyes closed, jaw tight, suit immaculate even on a long-haul flight. People only saw his calm exterior, but beneath it was a storm he had never learned to tame. He was known in business tabloids as the brilliant young CEO who built an empire from ashes, but no article ever mentioned the grief carved into his soul, that he had buried the love of his life only 7 months ago. That the baby he held was both his greatest blessing and his deepest reminder of what he had lost. He tried, he really tried, but grief came in waves, and parenthood came in storms, and sometimes both drowned him at once. The crying didn't stop. It seemed to grow louder, sharper, more frantic. And with every cry, the passengers grew increasingly restless. Someone muttered about lack of discipline, someone else rolled their eyes, and a woman put on headphones aggressively, as though shutting out the sound would shut out her impatience. But no one saw the tremble in the billionaire's hands, the way he swallowed hard, fighting the helplessness he hated. His assistant, seated behind him, looked equally overwhelmed but dared not intervene. Boundaries were boundaries when working for a man like him. Across the aisle, on a seat that had clearly seen better days, sat a young woman with a soft, worn sweater and a backpack that looked like her most prized possession. Her eyes were tired, but not from luxury. They held a different kind of exhaustion, the kind earned through struggle, through a life with more responsibilities than years. She watched the scene quietly, her gaze lingering not on the annoyed passengers, but on the baby's scrunched-up face and the father's trembling shoulders. Her heart recognized the silent kind of pain, the kind that didn't scream for attention but ached in every breath. She had been raised to notice things others ignored, hunger, sorrow, loneliness, because life had never granted her the privilege to look away. Her own mother had once soothed crying babies in exchange for food or shelter during harder days. She remembered watching her kneel beside tired parents, whispering lullabies that didn't belong to any language yet spoke to the heart directly. Now she saw that same need alive in the baby before her, and something deep inside her stirred. Minutes passed that felt like hours. The cabin felt heavy. The air hummed with tension. And then, without warning, the young woman unfastened her seatbelt, stood up, and did something nobody expected. She gently approached the billionaire and reached out her arms as if asking to hold the baby. At first, he didn't notice her. His eyes were still closed, as if shutting the world out was the only way to survive its noise. But then he felt her presence, a soft whisper of warmth, and opened his eyes. She didn't speak, not with words anyway, but her expression said everything. "Let me help." He hesitated, just for a moment. He didn't know her name, her story. But grief had stripped away his pride, exhaustion had softened his guard. Something about the sincerity in her gaze felt familiar, like the quiet strength his late wife once carried. Reluctantly, he placed the crying baby in her arms. The baby continued wailing, but only for a second. The moment the child pressed against her chest, a hush, small and unsure, fluttered through him. She held the baby as though she had practiced the motion 1,000 times, as though comforting was second nature. Slowly, she swayed in the narrow aisle, humming a melody so gentle it seemed to come from the air itself. Her voice carried a warmth the cabin had been missing. The melody wrapped around the baby like a soft blanket, and the child's cries weakened, softened, faded. And then, miraculously, stopped completely. A deep silence filled the cabin, not cold or heavy, but peaceful, like a sigh of relief shared by 100 strangers who suddenly remembered what empathy felt like. Passengers stared. The assistant blinked back disbelief. The billionaire exhaled shakily, and for the first time in months, his shoulders loosened just enough to breathe freely. He watched her, holding what mattered most to him in the world, with a gratitude he couldn't articulate. She didn't look triumphant, just calm, focused, almost motherly, though she seemed barely older than her early 20s. She sat beside him when offered, careful not to disturb the blessed quiet of the moment. The baby slept soundly against her heartbeat, as though he had always belonged there. And in that silence, something shifted, a stillness between two strangers that felt strangely meaningful. The plane flew over clouds lit by moonlight, their soft glow filtering through the windows like a blessing. The billionaire studied the girl's hands, gentle, steady, worn, hands that knew labor more than luxury. He was used to power shifting rooms when he entered. Now, power shifted within him as he realized what he had forgotten: connection, compassion, vulnerability. The girl didn't boast, didn't look around for acknowledgement. She simply held the baby as though the world outside didn't exist. The billionaire found himself staring at her profile, not out of attraction, but admiration. She had done what no nanny, no assistant, no expensive consultant could. She had brought peace to his child. And for the first time since losing his wife, he felt the faintest echo of hope stirring inside him, small and fragile like a flame shielded from wind. Hours passed. The baby slept. The billionaire rested his head back, exhaustion washing over him like a final wave after a long storm. He didn't truly sleep, but he drifted in and out, feeling strangely safe knowing someone else carried the weight for a little while. The girl stayed awake. She stroked the baby's tiny back gently, her eyes looking out the window into the endless night sky. She wondered about destiny, how sometimes two lives touched without warning, how small moments could alter entire paths. She wasn't wealthy, wasn't powerful, but she understood something many forgot: sometimes, the most valuable thing you can offer is your presence. As the plane began descending toward dawn, soft golden light spilled across the seats. The baby stirred, stretching tiny fingers. The girl smiled, whispering another lullaby, and once again the baby settled, this time without tears. The billionaire woke fully, eyes heavy but clearer. He sat up and looked at his child, then at the girl, and something in his heart cracked open. He had always believed strength was built from steel, discipline, ambition, yet here was strength softer than feathers, quieter than whispers, and yet far more powerful. He felt tears burn in his eyes, and he didn't fight them. The girl noticed but said nothing. She simply offered a tender smile that didn't intrude. When the plane landed, passengers began gathering their belongings, their earlier frustration replaced by a warmth they didn't entirely understand. People nodded kindly toward the girl, acknowledging a kindness they had witnessed firsthand. Even those who had complained silently now felt humbled. The billionaire gently lifted his baby from her arms. For a moment, their fingers brushed, rough and soft, privilege and struggle, and a silent gratitude passed between them. He wanted to offer money, help, something grand, because that was all he knew, but when he opened his mouth, she shook her head softly, as though already knowing what he would say. Her message was clear without words: not everything has a price. He closed his mouth and nodded, understanding in a way he never had before. She walked down the aisle with her backpack, her posture straight, her step steady. People moved aside for her, not out of intimidation but respect. The billionaire watched her until she disappeared into the crowd beyond the gate, carrying her quiet strength with her. Life moved on, but not quite the same. In the weeks that followed, he found himself thinking of her often, not in longing, but in reflection. Her simple act reshaped how he saw his own wealth, his grief, his child. He hired fewer people and held his baby more. He stepped out of meetings earlier to bathe his son. He began to talk to his child instead of simply caring for him. He held his baby close on sleepless nights, humming lullabies he didn't